Thank you very much for the opportunity. This is an article in which we analyze how Brazilian people support or not support Brazil as a regional leader in Latin America, more specifically in South America. So our initial thought, and we do that by using a public opinion sample and two sets of survey experience within this in a huge public opinion survey that we ran in 2014. In our original thought was to analyze if Brazilians actually supported. Our intuition was that the Brazilians in general would support regional leadership actions and positions in Latin America. But after running the survey, and gathering the data, and analyzing the results, we found out that Brazilians actually do not support regional leadership, which is kind of striking for our regional intuition. And it is a little difficult to understand why that happens, so the mechanism of why Brazilians are not supporting this kind of actions. So we try our best to connect our findings to the literature on regional leadership. When you look at the literature, most of the literature is it's more conceptualizing what actually means regional leadership, and analyzing one or two cases of regional leaders, whether it's Brazil, in Latin America, whether it's Brazil, Mexico, Argentina, or in Africa, whether it's South Africa, Nigeria, or Ethiopia, and India, and Asia, and so on and so forth. And they usually are built up on case studies based. And they rarely mention what will be the implications for regional leaders if they have a strong people support, domestic people, local people support, or if they had weak domestic people support. So that was our original idea, trying to see if we would see difference in these levels of support, right? So, and then we found we used the literature of regional leadership. We divided regional leadership into types of leadership, more like a normative leadership versus a materialistic leadership, in three different scenarios in Latin America, which is regime change, conflict, regional conflict, and regional integration, which are the three most important areas of regional leadership in which Brazil could act as a leader, right? And there is some differences in terms of levels of support among these three, but in general, they don't actually support. And we have some other data that is not in this particular paper. When we compare this leadership to Mexico and Argentina, it's this other paper that we're working on, and then we see Mexico, Argentina, and Peru, and then we will see in this other paper that Argentinians and Peruvians are very supportive of their country as regional leaders, whereas Brazilians and Mexicans are not that supportive. So one of the implications that theoretical implications of our study is that the regional leadership literature has to incorporate what the people actually think about regional leaders and if they support regional leadership or not. I mean, if you have, let's say, a country that has a very aggressive foreign policy towards to become a leader in a specific region, but it's people that do not, and it's a democratic country like Brazil, and the people of that country do not support this leadership. So that was most likely bring political costs to the leadership, to the political leadership of that specific countries. If they go against what their people actually think of that, if they are too aggressive, they might have a political backlash domestically, or vice versa. So that's this is one of the implications of our findings. We also, in terms of comparing two types of leadership, a more like a normative leadership and more aggressive leadership, we also didn't find any difference in terms of level of support. The good thing about survey experiments is that you can come up with, in the design that we made, that we came up with a couple of scenarios, likely scenarios, in which we put, like, for example, in the regional conflict scenario, we put like, there is a conflict going on between two neighboring countries of Brazil, and then Brazil acts very aggressively towards this with economic sanctions, for example, or Brazil does not do anything towards the regional leadership. So then we compare the scenarios across each other. There are 8 different scenarios, and then we find the differences in levels of support. So in every time that Brazil did not act as a leader, that there was something going on, either a regime change or a regional conflict going on, or a lack of or an economic integration with political problems. And every time Brazil was not acting as a leader or doing anything, we come up with a scenario that Brazil does not do anything, which is a control scenario. That one had more levels of higher levels of support than the other three. And this is very interesting, because if you look at the history of Brazilian foreign another implication, theoretical implication, is not for the literature of regional leadership per se, but it's for the literature of Brazilian foreign policy. And if you look at the Brazilian foreign policy literature, Brazil has never acted clearly in its political discourse as a regional leader. But most of the, especially during the Brazilian rise in the 2000s, now with the whole economic decline and the recent impeachment and all the elections going on, Brazil is not seen as clear as a regional leader in South America as before. But we ran this survey in 2014, so there was still this, the perception in the region is that the whole idea in the political community of foreign policy expert was that Brazil was a regional leader. It should act like it, and it should have the support of the political elite and the political people like that. Because if you look at many other subjects of foreign policy that the Brazilian political elite defends in their political discourse, and for example, multilateralism or peaceful resolution of conflicts, when you look at the survey polls, the Brazilian people in general support the same subjects. But specifically for regional leadership, Brazilian people do not support. And we think that they do not support because survey experiments compared to other type of open questions and surveys, you always have economic costs or political costs in the survey. It's very clear that if Brazil does a specific scenario, acts in a specific scenario, it will have a cost. And if you just make a general question, do you support the Brazilian regional leadership, people will most likely say yes. And actually, if you look at the 2010 and the 2014 open question about regional leadership, there was a very high support of regional leadership. But then when we ran the survey, the same survey, if you look at the survey experiment, then the scenario is totally reversed. Because why? It's because there is a political cost in the scenarios that it didn't happen in the open question scenario. So these are the main findings, and I think the two most important theoretical implications of our paper. Yes, we will be. I think the democratic countries, Brazil, even like, I mean, if you're looking now, we're in the middle of an election in October 2018, and the foreign policy issues are all the time in a debate. Brazil is going to help, or it's going to be more aggressive towards Venezuela, or if Brazil is going to align more with China or the United States, is all the time in political debate. So it's more and more in Brazil, international themes, international issues are going to be important for domestic politics. Something that is very clear and obvious in the United States, and it was not very clear in Brazil before. Brazil is not as internationalized, as globalized as the United States or European countries. And there was this sense in Brazil that the foreign policy was not important for the public in general. So this is one of the papers. We have a series of papers that go against this general sense. There was a consensus in Brazil that actually the public didn't care about foreign policy. We're showing in many other papers that this is not the case. This is one of the papers on this to this effect. And we are clearly showing that there is a constraint by the people to specific foreign policy actions. If the politicians themselves are going to take that into consideration or not, it's hard to tell, because we cannot say that actually foreign policy motivates the vote in Brazil, but we can show more and more that foreign policy is becoming a hot issue domestically. So I think for a regional leaders actually to become a regional leader, it's much more complex and involves many other aspects than just the support of its people. It has to have the capacity, it has to have the will, it has to be recognized by others as a regional leader. But if it's your own people does not recognize you as a regional leader, it's even more complicated, more costly for you to actually act as such, right? Our second paper that we're developing now with the same group of authors is that we are looking at comparing this, as I mentioned before, comparing regional leadership not only in Brazil but in Mexico, Argentina, and Peru. So a third wave of this, and now we are coming up with a new paper. So as I mentioned before, is the same, more or less the same pattern you find in Mexico, and then it's different in Argentina and Peru. And it's interesting is that Brazil and Mexico are the two Latin American countries that have more capacity to become regional leaders. And it's more likely that these two countries are going to be recognized as leaders, more in Brazil more than Mexico. Than Peru and Argentina. Peru and Argentina don't have the material capacity or the normative capacity to be a regional leader. And it's very hard for them to be recognized as such. So these are the second wave of studies. The third wave of studies, something in the future that we would like to study, is that if the other countries recognize Brazil or Mexico as a regional leader, but using survey experiment, because we have this data with open question surveys. And if you look at the Mexican survey, because we run a survey in Brazil, it's the same set of questions in Brazil, in Mexico, in Argentina, Peru, Uruguay, Paraguay, and Ecuador, right? It's the Las Americas project that is organized and led by CIDI, which is a college in Mexico, and here, University of São Paulo in Brazil, and then the specific universities in Argentina, Chile, and so on and so forth. And then if you compare the other surveys, you always see Brazil as the most likely country to be a leader. Now we're gonna run again the survey in 2018, the end of 2018, and in Brazil in 2019. And my intuition says that Brazil are not going to be seen anymore as the natural regional leader, right? Because of the decline in Brazil in the last couple of years, economic decline and political decline, and all the political side effects of the impeachment, and now with the very traumatic elections that we're going on in Brazil right now. And then it will be very interesting to look again if Brazilians continue to support specific regional leadership actions or not. My intuition again is that they are not going to support. So answering to your question, going back to the initial to your question, is that politicians in general should take in consideration what the people think in terms of foreign policy, and if the people think that this foreign policy should be this one to this direction or to the other direction in terms of regional leadership. These politicians should take consideration how these people see different types of regional leadership.